All right, so it's 3:33 p.m. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to start by welcoming everyone to this webinar. We're really excited here today. I'm Duncan McDonald-Korth from COVID Loan Tracker. A lot of you will have known me from our previous webinars and our other outreach that we've done, but I'm excited to say that we have over 1,000 small businesses registered for this webinar. So there's going to be a lot of new faces today. And the reason we're so excited is that we have a team here from the SBA. We have Sara Branch, who's in charge of outreach and marketing. We have Roxana Chicas, who is a program analyst, and we have a senior lending specialist, Shelley Brown. And this awesome team is going to help with all your questions. One of the things that's going to be a little bit different for us today, Shelley's going to kick off with a deck covering PPP Forgiveness and EIDL, and I'm excited to tell everyone that the information in that is much more than standard fare, and there's some new unique stuff which we hadn't heard before. So I think businesses will be excited about that. One thing to bear in mind is that this is going to be a little bit different in terms of the information. So as many of you know, we often address really particular questions with, sort of creative and contextual answers. But obviously having Sara, Shelley, and Roxanne from the SBA, they can't really comment on sort of speculative situations as being part of the SBA. So one of the things that I think is going to be really interesting in this webinar is how we're going to be able to cut through a lot of the misinformation that's on the internet. And I think everyone on here will know what I'm talking about how this stuff is handled. And so they'll, in addition to being able to answer questions, they'll be able to help give us real clear directions on where and who to go to within the SBA to get the answers that we need, because we all obviously have special situations that need to be addressed. I'm going to kick over to Shelley for the deck in a moment, but before I do, I thought I'd just tell everyone a bit about COVID Loan Tracker since there's a lot of new faces. So we started off on April 8th, so about a week after the whole PPP program started. My wife and I are the co-founders of it. As many would know, we were originally a source to figure out where PPP money was flowing, but in the last few months, we've really transitioned to being an informational resource for small businesses to navigate this pandemic economy, which is obviously so challenging for everyone. And so as part of that, we're doing various webinar series. And so this is the first one we're doing with the SBA, which we're really excited about. So without further ado, Shelley, I will put up the deck and you can walk us through it. And then I'm assuming you can see my screen and you can just tell me when to switch slides. Does that work? And Shelley, you're on mute.
Yes, that'll work. That'll be fine. I'll just say next slide, and if you can transfer it, that'll be great.
Perfect.
So thank you for having us. I want to thank you. I'm going to go over our PowerPoint and the forgiveness and the EIDL and reconsideration and assistance that's out there for all of you. I'm assuming that people are across the country, so we'll look at who you need to contact maybe within your state for assistance, but my contact number will be at the end of this slide deck, and I'll be more than happy to help anybody even though you're not in my servicing area. I am the lender relationship specialist for the state of New Mexico, and I work with Sara and Roxana, and they work heavily on the PPP and the EIDL loans. So welcome everybody. Change the next slide. Okay. First of all, I just want to cover the two different programs, which probably a lot of you are familiar with, but this kind of gives a side-by-side comparison. So the payment protection plan, of course, that's done through a lender. No collateral is required, and it's generally used. 60% is used for payroll, and then the other 40% can be used for operating costs and some working capital, things like that. You can use the full, I just got an email the other day where a lender wasn't aware of this, but you can use the whole 100% for payroll costs, and you don't have to use it for any type of working capital or bills that are out there. It is a loan at 1% for the unforgiven portion. So when you fill out your forgiveness package, if at least 60% was not used for payroll cost, then that will not be forgiven, and that will go into that loan of 1%. Based on when you made that loan, it's going to be either a 2-year term or a 5-year term. The 5-year term came, I believe it was June 5th. So any loans that were made after June 5th is on a 5-year note. If you're on a 2-year note and the whole amount wasn't forgiven, you can work with your lender to see if you can extend that term period. The first 6 months of that payment is deferred, so no payments till the first 6 months. And of course, the eligible entities are the small businesses. The economic injury disaster loan, which we call EIDL, is used for working capital. No collateral for loans that are under 25,000. Over 25,000, they seek collateral to the best of the ability. There is no forgiveness on this. So it is a loan at 3.75 for small businesses. If it's nonprofit, it's 2.75. It is a 30-year note. No payments. Payments are deferred on the for the first 12 months. Payments begin on the 13th month. Next slide, please.
One moment. There we go.
So we're going to go into the forgiveness, the PPP forgiveness. And so how do you request forgiveness? You, as the borrower, you have that PPP, you applied with the lender. It is a lender loan. It's not an SBA loan. It's backed by SBA, but it is the lender loan. Therefore, you need to apply with the lender for the forgiveness. We have 2 forgiveness applications. We have the easy form, 3508 EZ, E, the letter E, Z, the letter Z. And then there's also instructions on it. These are the links for them, but you can go on to sba.gov to get these applications, and or the Treasury Department. If you you just Google Treasury Department PPP, you'll find these documents as well. The easy form, I would look at that one first. I think it's a 2-page form. There's 3 questions on the front page that will see if you qualify for that easy. It looks like the majority, except for those that have their larger companies, or they received a large amount, they're probably going to have to fill out the regular 3508 form. But look at the easy form first and the instructions. I double-checked the instructions today, and it goes line item exactly how you need to fill that out. The easy form is for businesses with no reductions in employees. So look at those. You have to fill that out. You need to take it to your lender with all the supporting documentation. Next slide, please. The loan forgiveness process. Okay, this is for lenders, so you don't really need to know this. But what they do, they had to sign up. We're using a third-party lender portal. The lenders sign up for it. They go through there. The third party will review everything, and then get back to the lender. So you can skip over that. This is more for lenders here. Submitting the information to the lender, you complete the loan forgiveness application within the 10 months. So it's the SBA form 3508 or 3508 EZ. And then the lender reviews it. The lender has 60 days from receipt of the application to review that loan. They can, if you go in and you have all the documentation, or you think you do, and you do not, they can actually refuse acceptance of it, because once they accept that, they have 60 days to process it. So if you're missing information, it's gonna either sit on somebody's desk and wait for you to return it, or they're gonna basically reject it and say, bring the information back fully filled out. You are certifying, when you fill out these forms, you're certifying that everything is true and correct. Then the lender reviews it and submits it. So when the lender, they have 60 days, they submit it to SBA for request of payment. SBA then has 90 days to review it. When I say SBA, it's that third party, but it's a third party that SBA hired. So the lender will, once we make the decision, we inform the lender, and then the lender will turn around and notify the borrower, the forgiveness amount, whether it's going to be fully forgiven or partially forgiven. So it's very, very important that if you use that money for that extra 40%, you've used it for properly for rent, mortgage interest, utilities, things along that line. You need to have proof of that. Same thing with your showing 60% was used for payroll. Next slide, please. Important notes for forgiveness, what amounts can be forgiven. I mentioned this, but I'll keep mentioning it because it's very important. Minimum loan proceeds for payroll expenses, 60%. Maximum loan proceeds for non-payroll is 40%. It's not an all or nothing. So let's say you only use 50% for payroll. That means there's 10% out there that didn't qualify, and that will not be forgiven. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, you know what? Let's go back one because this is a common question. I'm sorry. It just says, if applicable, the EIDL advance amounts will be deducted from the forgiveness amounts paid to lender. We've not received guidance on what is applicable. I'm getting conflicting information. There's something in writing. That's normally what we go by. But then we also received an email from the center processing all of these that have conflicting information. So we're waiting to get something in writing, so I cannot give total information on whether or not it's going to be forgiven. I was on a call this morning with an attorney that says it's a grant. It says it in the CARES Act, but then there's something in the interim final ruling that contradicts that. So we're waiting for a solid answer on that. But when I look at the forms this morning on the 3508EZ, it doesn't say you subtract it out. You just have to put the amount on there, and then we're going to verify it. Next slide, please. Eligible payroll cost is salaries, wages, commissions, tips, employee benefits, which is the vacation, parental, family, medical, and sick leave, state and local taxes assessed on compensation. And then for sole proprietors, it's wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employed. And then seasonal business, average monthly payroll cost between February 15th and June 30th. And then the new businesses, average monthly payroll cost from January 1st to February 29th. In order to qualify for the PPP, you had to be in business prior to this pandemic outbreak, which, and when this all started, it was February 15th. If you opened a business February 20th, you wouldn't qualify. Anything prior to that, and any bills, let's say bills that you had prior to that, that would count as your non-payroll debts. Anything that you accumulated after that would not count. Next, please. Other eligible costs would be rent under lease agreements, utilities, interest on mortgage obligations, and interest on any other debt obligations that were incurred before February 15th, which I kind of skip around. I do that quite often. Okay, the cover period starts on the date the borrower received the funds. So when they did the PPP loan and you receive the funds, that's the day it starts. And then the first payroll cycle period. Funds to be used within 24 weeks to be eligible for forgiveness. Next slide, please. It went from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, so everybody qualifies for the 24 weeks. And it states that on the application as well. When must payroll costs be incurred and paid to be eligible for forgiveness? Payroll cost is eligible for forgiveness if it was paid or incurred during the covered period, or if paid on or before the next regular payroll date. And then when must non-payroll cost? Pretty much the same. During the covered period or incurred during the covered period and paid before the next billing cycle, even if the billing cycle is after the covered period. Next slide. The deferral period for forgiveness. You can submit your forgiveness application at any time. So if you've used the money already, you can start working on getting your forgiveness package together and all your supporting documentation, and then meet with your lender to give them your application. If you do not apply for forgiveness within 10 months of the last day of the covered period, the PPP is no longer deferred, and you must start making payments on the principal and interest on that loan, on that note that you signed with the lender at that 1% with the payment that they stated. If the loan is not forgiven in full, the lender will set up a payment schedule with you. And SBA will determine if it's not eligible for forgiveness. The PPP will no longer be deferred, and then you as a borrower would need to start making payments, principal and interest on that loan. Next slide, please. Timeline for forgiveness. The lender issues a decision to SBA within 60 days after receipt of a complete loan forgiveness application. The decision will be an approval in whole or part, denial, or denial due to pending SBA review. In the case that the lender denies it, the borrower may request the lender for reconsideration application for the loan request. And it could be maybe there wasn't sufficient information given to them. So if you provide maybe additional information, then they'll do a reconsideration for you. And then the lender will notify the SBA of the borrower's request for review, and they send that through our loan portal, which I understand, I don't have access to it because I'm not the lender submitting those, but all the lenders I speak to, which I speak to lenders on a daily basis, they're all telling me that portal is very easy to maneuver. So if you ever hear it's like, well, we can't get it in the system, that's not true. I'm not hearing that's not true. It's probably one of the easiest systems from what I understand. And then in case SBA, so once we receive it, if we deny it, then you can always appeal the decision to our OHA, which is Office of Hearing and Appeals. Next slide. Okay, in case it's denied, the lender notifies the borrower in writing, so they're going to let you know that it was denied. And then we always have the right to review the lender's decision at its own discretion. And with that being said, I'm just going to jump back to something, and then I'll get back to this. Any loan that's over $2 million is automatically audited by SBA. And then SBA can randomly select files to audit. So we're not going to come to you for the audit. We're going to go to the lender for the audit, and they need to make sure that there's all that information in there. You as the borrower, since you've asked for forgiveness, if you get forgiveness, you need to hang on to all of that in the event that later down the road, it may be audited and the lender may need some supporting documentation. So now I'm going to jump to that third little box where it says borrower may request SBA to review the decision within 30 days of notice. And your pictures are in the way, so now I can't see that slide. What does it say?
Oh, sorry.
I just see everybody's pictures. Oh, you know what? Here. Oh, okay, I got it. The lender must notify the SBA of the borrower's request within 5 days. I heard it's 5 days, and then I recently heard 5 working days, which to me makes more sense. But when I first heard about this, it did state 5 days, but to me it seems like it should be 5 working days because most lenders do not work on the weekends. If SBA declines the request for the review, SBA will notify the lender. And then if SBA accepts the request for the review, if SBA accepts the request for review, SBA will notify the borrower and lender of the results. If SBA denies forgiveness in whole or part, the borrower can appeal to SBA with OHA within 30 days of the first notice. If no SBA review occurs, or if SBA OHA denies the appeal, the lender will notify the borrower and set up a payment schedule with you. Next slide.
Sorry. There we go.
So this is, if you get denied, this is on the PPP, not the EIDL. Keep that in mind. This is a PPP. If the SBA denies the loan forgiveness, the borrower can appeal, and it's the Associate General Counsel for Litigation, and that's the address and also the email. You must have all the required documentations or it will be dismissed, and then they'll review it and let you know what their decision is. Next slide. Hopefully that won't be the case. If you have all your supporting documentation, you won't have to go through this. If your loan or a portion of the loan is not forgiven, so this is that June 5th. So your loan was made before June 5th. You have the 2-year repayment period. And then a 5-year extension is possible, but it is an agreement between the lender and the borrower. And that's the interest rate at 1%, no prepayment penalties. You can pay it off at any time. Loans that were made after June 5th, we've extended that repayment term from 2 years to 5 years. Again, you can also, if they didn't request or if they did not forgive the full amount and you need to start making payments and the payment maybe doesn't work within your budget, you need to work out with your lender to see if they will extend that term beyond that 2-year note. Otherwise, it's going to remain at the 2-year. Next slide, please. When you're filling out those applications, we have a lot of businesses that are becoming overwhelmed. Again, that 3508 easy form is pretty simplified, but we also have partners that receive SBA funding. There are resource partners that assist you. They can assist you with information on helping you fill out those applications. They cannot by any means fill those applications out for you. SBA personnel cannot fill out those forms for you. The bankers, the lenders cannot fill those forms out for you. Those are a conflict of interest. They will assist, not when I say they, our partners can assist you. The lenders, if you go in and ask them for assistance, they're not going to be able to do it. If you go into an SBA office, you won't have anybody be able to assist you to do that. I can assist with like maybe basic information, but when it comes to your finances and what you need to fill in here or there, I cannot help you with that, nor can your lender. So we have partners that that can help you. And if you have questions, if you read the instructions, it's pretty clear. But if you get maybe confused, then you maybe need to reach out to one of these. And I didn't put any addresses or anything on here since we have people throughout the nation. But we have the Small Business Development Centers, the SBDCs, and SCORE, which are mentors. And these are free of charge, by the way. And then there's Women Business Centers in your area. And if you're a veteran, you can go to the Veteran Business Outreach Centers, commonly known as VBOC. You can go onto our website to find out who in your area or where they're at by visiting that website at www.sba.gov/local assistance. And then it'll pull up what state you're in, and you can pull up who you'd like to connect with. It also has the information of who is in your local SBA office if you need somebody to speak to. Next slide, please. This is my information. Oh, yep. And I'll be happy to assist anybody, like I said, with throughout the nation. I'm fine with that. My number is 505-248-8228. That's my office number, and then my email address. Additionally, we have Sara and Roxana. They're also willing to help as well. So with that, if we go to the next slide, we can open it up and maybe for question and answers, or you can, I forgot I had that slide. Frequently asked questions, we update this constantly. You can go to sba.gov and pull that up. The most recent one we had, I believe, was August either 11th or the 24th. I think it was the 24th maybe. But it's questions that continually come up, and so they put together frequently asked questions, and it has certain questions about certain things. Seasonal employees, let's say, how do you calculate that? And then the PPP loan forgiveness. So those are the sites for that. And then the next slide, I think, is Q&A.
Yeah, okay, great. So thank you very much for that, Shelley. That was immensely useful. And it was also interesting to hear a little bit from your perspective, from the SBA's perspective, about how the whole process is going, because from the borrower side and the media side, you hear one thing, but obviously it probably looks very different from where you're sitting. So the anecdotes about your own experiences would be quite interesting as we proceed as well. And I want to tell everyone, because we get a lot of questions about this, this recording is going to be made available to everyone watching, anyone that registered, and it will be sent out after the webinar as like a follow-up email from Zoom. And then additionally, one thing we're going to do, and this is because frankly the SBA was so great about this, we've never had this before, is that we are actually going to have an answer for all the questions that were asked for all the registrants. So we're putting together a document because we have answers for them. It's way too many to handle on the 1-hour webinar, so we've selected some, but again, all the questions will have an answer for you to reference. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that. So I am going to, we'll leave the deck up for now, because sometimes it's useful to go back and reference something that comes up in the questions with the deck. But give me one moment and I'm going to transition to the questions.
James,
Sure,
I'm sorry, can I interject here a moment?
please.
If somebody has a personal issue, there was one that came on some of the questions yesterday, and I did not feel comfortable answering those because it was a long list of questions, and I didn't know if those were going to be put out to everybody. But somebody had put in their account number, and I wasn't comfortable answering that on a public forum, but I'll
Yeah.
be happy to assist them one-on-one.
Yes, so absolutely understood. So we're not planning to ask or say personal identifiable information on here. As a matter of fact, one moment, Rita, can you pull up the PowerPoint? Because if I look at the questions, it's sharing it. So I want to stop sharing and you start sharing. Sorry, just one logistical thing here. No, you pull up the PowerPoint, her PowerPoint, and then I will pull up the questions on my screen so now everyone can see everything. Yeah, part of what we're handling right now is a lot of the questions that people ask have their IN numbers and application numbers and all sorts of things, which we obviously don't want to make public on a webinar. So
if the loan has been made, let's say it's an EIDL loan, if it's in the process, I don't have access to any loans that are being processed. That is through the disaster center. So that's when they have to contact the disaster center. If the loan has been made, I'm able to look that loan up. It's made and closed and dispersed. Then I'm able to look it up. And then I have 2 different toll-free numbers which they can call for their EIDL loans.
there we are. Thank you, Shelley. Okay, great. Now, here we go. Okay, so some of these questions, as you know, some are hyper-specific, some are more perfunctory, all are relevant. A lot of questions, Shelley, and everyone on the webinar, as you may imagine, pertain to situations that might be confusing, and also we have a lot of questions about rejections and reconsideration and so forth. So there'll be a good amount of coverage of that. And we try to organize these questions into like topics like EIDL, PPP Forgiveness, EIDL Reconsideration, etc. But it's hard to organize because we get hundreds of questions and they're all quite specific. So if we skip around a bit, forgive us. So one thing I think is a good place to start about EIDL. A lot of people are asking if they can increase their EIDL loan because, as we know, a lot of people applied and were eligible for X. Then when the cap got moved down to 150, they only got so much. Is there a way, even if you were below the cap, to increase your EIDL loan?
It is possible. If they receive the funds, they can request an increase, not to exceed the 150,000. When this first rolled out, it was 2 million, but we received, I think right now in the processing, there's 5 million applications being processed right now. And then we're still getting applications every day. So they had to lower it because of the sheer volume of it.
Yeah.
They had to lower it from the 2 million to 150. If you received the maximum of 150, you will not be able to get an increase. They sent out an email that says, let's say you're eligible for, let's say $100,000. And then a lot of borrowers found out that they may have to secure some collateral with that and they didn't want to. So then they lowered it down to 25,000 with no collateral. They were approved at one point up to 100. They can contact the disaster center after closing, is a different toll-free number than the regular one, but after closing, and they can request an increase on it, but not to exceed the 150,000. So yes, it is possible to do that.
I see. Okay, 2 things actually there that I want to highlight. Number one, there's in the questions that the SBA has answered for us, like I mentioned, there's a lot of phone numbers and contact information that is specifically relevant to the questions being asked. So whether it's EIDL reconsideration, etc., PPP, and all of those will be in a document that we're going to publish. So because obviously it's hard to keep track of phone numbers during a webinar. So that will be in the document that you guys can receive after. The second thing is, one of the things I thought was interesting in your answer, and I know from speaking to you guys beforehand, is the 5 million applications. And so we get a lot of questions from small businesses and obviously some frustration about why isn't it going faster. And the fact that you guys pointed out that there are 5 million applications and they're coming in constantly. I think it speaks to why it's hard to work through everything. So I kind of wanted to mention that.
Well, in addition to that, this just kind of rolled out so quickly. As an SBA employee, I found out about this PPP program watching the news and having Trump announce it. Our agency was not alerted ahead of time. So that's how I found out. And then it just rolled out so quickly. And that's the reason why we're on 2022 IRF. And then we rolled out the disaster, but then the disaster became, it clogged the system. So what we did is we hired a lot of people, but a lot of these people are temporary employees and they don't have the authority to give information on your loan. So when you call that disaster toll-free number and you speak to somebody, they have to give you the basic information, which is it's in the queue, because they are not authorized and or certified to give financial information out, loan information out. And that's the reason why sometimes you get that vague information, it's in the queue. That means it's being ready to be assigned to a certified loan specialist that can make a decision on that loan. How many people that is, I do not know, but that's the reason why, and I get the frustration because, you know, who wants to be on hold and listen to, you know, that cheesy music? I don't even know if they have music, but that's the reason why you kind of get that generic answer, is because they're not certified to give you information on your loan.
Yes. Okay, that makes perfect sense. And one thing that I noticed in the answers that you guys gave us was, and that frankly, being involved in this, I hadn't heard before, which I thought was quite interesting that the audience should hear, is that you said, in addition to sort of the national phone numbers for the specific centers that one might call, you guys also pointed out that you can and should contact your local SBA offices because you might be able to get help there faster. Is that correct?
Well, yes. Each office, and sometimes it may be the same generic information because it is waiting to be assigned to somebody. So we all have a point of contact that is not open for the public, because you can imagine how that would be. So it has to go through our district office, has to go through your local district office, and there's a point of contact that they can get some information. But again, if it's in the queue, that's pretty much all they can tell us because it hasn't been worked on, but it's trying to be assigned to somebody. So there's a couple of things. If a loan number has been assigned, they can look up the loan number and find out what the record is. Every time you call in and you have your application number, every time it's documented. So if you call in 10 times, it's going to be documented how many times you called and what the conversation was and what you're requesting. So keep that in mind as well. So the point of contact is when you send in either an email or you make a phone call, either Roxana with our district. It'll be myself, Roxana, anybody in our office, and Sarah. Then we try to figure it out, and then we can send it up to the point of contact to have them review it and see what the status is. We will get probably a better status if there's a loan number. If there's an application number, it may give you the same information that it in fact is in the queue, just waiting to be assigned to somebody.
And in terms of contacting the SBA, would you recommend, is it better to do it by phone? Is it better to do it by email, fax? What do you think is the most effective way, if there is one?
Well, in our office, we have people that call Sara directly, Roxana directly, people call me directly. They're our district director, our deputy, they call us directly. We have the main line. People will call and leave a voicemail on the main line, and Sara and Roxana field that phone every day throughout the day. So it's not like it's going to sit for a couple of days. They're on it and they return the phone call and look into it. And then they'll field it out to whomever they feel that would be able to best assist them. So if a phone call is fine, email always works as well. If you go on the website and for local assistance, you can find out who in your area is either the lender relations specialist, work with lenders, and or the outreach marketing specialist, or an economic development specialist. So pretty much anybody in the office should be able to assist. Okay. And there's listings in there of emails and phone numbers for every single district office. So that's a good place to start, either phone and or email.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No fax, because who uses faxing nowadays?
Well, we wondered, honestly, we brought that up because we thought it might be a loophole, which is not as many people do it, so maybe it's getting paid attention to. But good, but thanks for pointing out.
You know what? We have an old-fashioned fax machine, which it floors me who would ever use it. But there's stuff in there that because nobody hardly ever looks because it's kind of in the mailroom.
Yeah.
And if something comes through, it's like, oh, this came in a week ago. So that one's not manned like everybody else's.
So no fax.
Right.
We'll call it that. All right. So I want to ask another EIDL question that we got. So one, I would say, sort of anxiety that small businesses have about EIDL is the sort of record keeping side. And so someone asked a good question: if the EIDL's a 30-year note, do I have to keep records for 30 years or just up to the amount of the loan? And so just if you could comment on the record keeping requirements for EIDL.
Maybe Sarah or Roxana may know more than me, but the last I heard it was keep them for 7 years.
That's correct, Shelley. We
Okay.
we do have to go ahead and keep it for 7 years, but I mean, if you just want to go ahead and stay on top of it, keep it for as long as you want. Remember, it is a loan, so you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row.
Because SBA can audit that at any time.
Yes, that's what I wanted to make clear to everyone, and I think a lot of people know that. But obviously, the anxiety is that for smaller businesses, they might not all have professionalized financial record keeping. So it's just important for them to realize that if you are taking this loan, it's very important to keep those records well done and on hand, so in case you do get audited. You know, one question I want to ask that came up in this topic, this is not related to EIDL, but I don't want to forget it, is one thing that sole proprietors ask us all the time, and I think it would be good to hear from the SBA, is what is the best way to keep records, whether particularly for PPP, but also for EIDL, if they're using their personal bank account and they don't have a separate business bank account. Do you guys have a recommendation on how that that could be done? Either highlighting individual transactions that say that this is business or not. Do you have any comment on that?
I think I missed part of it. First of all, they can't count a draw as payroll that they paid themselves. But what was it a question? Can you repeat that? What is the root of the question?
The question is that for record keeping purposes, if you have a separate personal and business bank account for your business, it is much easier to keep records. But at the time of taking PPP, many businesses, mostly sole proprietors, have had one bank account, which is their personal bank account, but they operated their business through it because they're a sole proprietor. And so there's a decent amount of anxiety among small businesses. So we get lots of questions about this, about what is the best so business expenses versus personal expenses if by nature the funds are sort of commingled because they're using one account. Do you understand what I'm saying now?
Wow. First of all, that should never ever happen. They should always keep them separate, and we always say that at that point, you're going to have to go to your lender, and ultimately you have to work with your lender on what they will accept. Because if you're using your personal account to pay for business, you know, did you save the bills? Can the bills line up? Is a bill in the business name or is it in the personal name? You're going to have to work with your lender on that because ultimately they're the one that's going to give the blessing for the forgiveness.
Okay. And that's an excellent. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out, as far as for the EIDL loan, I could go ahead and let you know that is one of the main reasons why a lot of applications are being held back, because when people are reviewing your account and it shows as a personal account, it kind of triggers a, hey, this might be a scam. So just go ahead and keep that in mind. Go ahead and make sure that you do use your personal account when you're applying for the EIDL loan. That way they know that it is a business account. So I just wanted to point that out there because whenever people apply for these EIDL loans, we need to realize that it is a system that was placed in just for this particular loan. And if it shows as a personal loan, it's going to go ahead and automatically track it, and that might delay your process.
All right, so apply with the business account.
Exactly.
All right, that is great advice that we haven't heard from anyone. So thank you both for answering that. let me keep going here. So I'm scrolling through a gigantic list of questions. Let's see. Oh, we got, I'm trying to avoid questions that we can't really comment on, about like if there's going to be a second round of PPP, which nobody knows yet.
Okay, so I'll answer that because as of now, no. There is something that the Senate introduced, but the way the process works is when the Senate introduced the bill, then it has to go to the House. The House will look at it, either agree, disagree, then they have to work out what they're going to do. Once they agree on it, then it has to go to the president. Once the president signs, then it goes into law that we can do it. So as of now, no, there isn't one. We probably won't hear anything. They're not even coming back until after Labor Day. So we're not going to hear anything if it does come about. The administrator is optimistic about it, but as of now, no, there isn't another round yet. That's not to say it's not going to happen, but as of now, no, there's not. So unless it becomes signed, then we can comment on it. But right now, no, it's not happening.
Nothing official yet.
Right.
And I know people's follow-up is, well, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to receive funding? We're still in coronavirus. Make sure that you have your relationships with your local SBA agency and your local resource partners like SCORE, SBDC, VBOC. If you go to your local SBA agent like Shelley showed on her slides, it'll direct you to your resource partners, and they're there to help you guys with grants, with funding, with other loan options. They're aware of what the state has. We get state updates, and though we aren't the state, our resource partners give us information, so when you guys call us, we can help them. But we direct people to our resource partners so that they can help with grants and funding. And also remember that EIDL is still available. For those of you who have not yet applied for EIDL, that's still available as well.
Excellent to know. Shelley, can you cover, yes. So you made a good point during the presentation about talking about the mechanics of the EIDL advance versus the PPP. And so I don't want you to speculate if there's going to be any changes to that, but can you just go through one more time the mechanics of the relationship between the EIDL advance and PPP forgiveness as it stands now? Obviously, it could change at any point in the future through congressional action and so forth. But the basic point, I think that this has come up on several of our webinars, is so is the EIDL advance amount that you received subtracted for PPP forgiveness. So hypothetically, let's say you received a $2,000 EIDL advance and you had a $20,000 PPP. And let's assume that the whole thing was forgivable, the whole PPP, but you had that $2,000 EIDL advance. Does that mean that you're going to end up having to pay the difference between the 20,000 or the 2,000 less than 20,000? So you have to repay that $2,000. Is that how it works?
There's conflicting information on that. New information recently came to my attention from the portal.
Okay.
But it's not in writing and under any of our IFRs or the frequently asked questions. So I can only tell you what it says in writing is if it's applicable, then we will subtract it out. Now, what that means, there's no guidance on that either. So
this needs
I can't really say 100%. I can say when I reviewed the 3508 easy, it does not subtract out the forgiveness amount.
Okay, so that's one thing. So that's a good point. And one of the things that a lot of people ask in here is, my lender is not offering the forgiveness portal yet, where we would fill out sort of an automated easy form. And when they contact their lender, the lender says, well, it's because we don't want to put it up because the SBA is, still providing guidance and changing the rules. So one question, which I think I know the answer, but we should ask it is there any way that if a business has already gone through, used the money during a cover period and wants to apply for forgiveness, can they do it through you? And no, you cannot.
Okay, no, we cannot process those because again, that's a lender loan.
Okay, exactly. So, yeah.
So since I work with lenders very closely within my state, and I know them, and I talk to many during the day, but I can tell you what a lot of their feelings are. Under the skinny bill, which is where they're introducing a few things, they're still looking at doing a threshold for forgiveness. And that's kind of being introduced. Whether that's going to go through or not, we don't know, and I can't really say, because you know, that's in Washington D.C. and there's nothing in writing, and there's nothing that came down as law or bill. But they're all hoping that about 80% of all PPP loans are either 150,000 or less. Mm-hmm. So there's talk, just talk, and doesn't mean it's official, of having an automatic forgiveness. What that looks like, nobody knows. It's just kind of put on the table. But so lenders are kind of waiting, because you know, if I have a lender that did 1,000 loans, and let's say 80% of those were 150,000 or less, if they can do the threshold and have less paperwork, then they're going to wait for that. And so a lot of lenders are waiting to see what that's going to happen. So that's the reason why. But if you're ready, you're more than welcome to fill out that application and meet with that lender. If you have all your supporting documentation, they should be able to accept it. They're supposed to accept it. You can get your paperwork ready and wait until they're ready, but that's what's happening in the lender community, and that's the talk I'm receiving back from the lenders, my lenders in my state, not every state, just my state.
Okay, well that makes sense, because obviously if everything under 150,000 were automatically forgiven, it would reduce the administrative burden very significantly. So
yeah, well, because the heroes of this PPP loan were our community banks. So the community banks are smaller. They have a smaller SBA loan department. So if you have 1,000 loans that they need to service that they're not used to servicing, that's a lot of manpower if they do not have it. And they're not hiring people just to do that. So a lot of them are waiting because the paperwork is going to be overbearing for them.
Yeah, it makes sense. So we have about 10 minutes left here. So I wanted to move on to some reconsideration questions. So we got a lot of EIDL reconsideration. As you may know, there's a lot of people that are just very confused about why they were rejected. So they say, I have a good credit score, I had good documents, and then something happened and I didn't get approved. And so I was wondering if you could walk us through, from your perspective, sort of the official way that you have to go about reconsideration, and then if, you know, Sara, Roxana, or you had guidance on how to put together the materials, or like what you said about making sure to link your business bank account. Are there like best practices that a business should follow for the reconsideration process?
Okay, I'll address that. Let me go back to the advance. The advance is no longer available. So if you have an application in process, the advance is no longer available there. So you're not going to get the advance. I've gotten a lot of questions that say, well, I thought it was $10,000. It's not 10,000. It is up to 10,000. So the advance back then was $1,000 per employee. So we've had self-employed people that didn't put themselves as employees, so they put 0 employees, and they got 0. When if you had a husband and wife, let's say, business, you should have put 2, and you would have got the $2,000 advance. So it's $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000. So if you had 20 employees, the maximum you would get is 10,000. If you had 5 employees, the maximum you would get is 5,000. So that's the reason why that, for some reason I was getting a lot of calls and questions like, why didn't I get 10,000? It is just up to a maximum of 10,000. With that being said, again, I'll reiterate that the advance is no longer available if your loan is still being processed. If you've not received it, you're not going to receive it. But if your loan was denied, one of the top, I'll tell you the top 2 or 3 reasons, and the very first one is credit. So okay. We always run a credit, and we look at your personal credit score, and if it's below that threshold, the loan specialist will look at it and determine whether or not a repayment ability is available. So if you have a low credit score, we'll send out the denial letter, and it clearly states on there that, that we pulled I think it's Experian credit report. You need to get a copy of that credit report, and you get it for free. Anytime you're denied a loan and you receive a letter on that, you can contact that credit bureau, and they will send you a copy of your credit bureau. it's very important that you look through that credit bureau and look for issues. Look for maybe some small issues. Maybe you had, I don't know, like a cell phone that went to collection and that could easily be cleared up. So you need to see what you can do to clear those up and explain the circumstances for reconsideration. So sending a letter that just says, I want you to reconsider, but you need to outline what it needs to be reconsidered under, and get the details of that. But a lot of people don't do that. They don't take that next step. I've seen those denial letters, and it clearly states the reason that they are denied, and credit being one of them. And your first step should be to review your credit report and see what's on there. Then they'll look at it to see if you have the ability to repay. Again, this is a loan. So if your credit score isn't high enough, doesn't show that you're able to make repayment, if the information that you submitted for your financials shows that it doesn't cash flow, if you can't cash flow, you're not going to get the loan. That's not just with our disaster loan. That's if you were to apply for our regular SBA loan through a lender, you can have $1 million in assets, but if your business does not cash flow, you will not get that loan. One of the second most common errors and being denied is that a lot of businesses may be overstating their cost of goods, or they made an error. Let's say their cost of goods is $5,000, but they put in an extra zero and it says $50,000, and now you're in a negative cash flow. We're going to look at it and say this business does not cash flow, so therefore they don't have the ability to take out a loan and repay that loan. So you need to look at that again as well. So look at, it specifically tells you on that letter, one, what you need to do for reconsideration, but just asking for a reconsideration is not good enough. You need to prove and overcome the objections on that letter. And then maybe one of the third one is just character issues. And we've done loans and we've approved loans with somebody that had felony against them, but if you're currently on parole or something like that, you're not eligible for a loan. And if you've committed any type of felony in the past and or a crime against a child, you have to fill out what we call a Form 912, and that's our character issue. And then you have to go get fingerprints, send that up, and then we do a quick background check on that. So those three things seem to be the most common from when I talk to my contact at the disaster center. So if you do receive a letter that indicates that it was declined, you need to overcome those, not just sending a letter, ask for reconsideration. You need to overcome what the issue was.
Okay, so that makes sense. So basically, when you're doing a reconsideration, put in the effort to understand the problem, then engage with it and explain it to overcome it, basically, is the idea.
Yes, and cash flow information, you're going to have to provide your most recent tax return and then sign that 4506T, which is the IRS form, allowing us to access those tax records to make sure that the information that you provided to us is exactly what you provided to the IRS, and then we compare those two. So we'll look at it. So if your business doesn't cash flow, it's not an automatic, you apply for it and you get it. It is a loan. So you have to qualify for that loan.
Absolutely.
And then, I'm sorry, let me go ahead and point this out. Just like Shelley mentioned, if you are declined, you got to go ahead and continue with that particular loan number. Please don't go ahead and start an additional loan, because again, this is a system. So the system is going to go ahead and notice the same information, and it's going to think that it's a duplicate. And that is, again, going to delay your process. So just, if you apply once, go ahead and stick to that loan number and try to avoid applying again and causing yourself to go ahead and wait a longer time than you should.
That sounds like good advice to me. On the EIDL topic, by the way, one other question is, some people have taken it out, but now don't want it. And is there a way to sort of give the money back?
Yes, they can repay that loan back, yes.
I see. And is there a process to do it like all at once so that then they don't have to do it over X number of years?
Yes, they can pay it all at once, and there's no prepayment penalty.
Okay. Excellent.
Yes.
And it won't affect your credit score either.
Yes. And I could go ahead, I could give you guys you guys could either do it by phone, by mail, or on pay.gov. that is one way to go ahead and do so.
Okay,
And
excellent.
we could go ahead and add that to the information before we send it out to all the attendees, so they
Okay,
could have that.
that'd be really useful.
And
Go
the
ahead.
information to make payments should have been in the closing package on how you make your payments. Generally, pay.gov is the best way, but it
Okay.
should be in that information how to do it.
Okay, good to know. I wanted to ask you guys a question about the covered period and employment. And this is actually a question that came up in the chat, which was, there's a decent amount of confusion about for the restoration of full employment. Does the covered period end for that when you apply for forgiveness? So let's say you wanted to do a 24-week forgiveness, but you applied after, say, 16 weeks. Is that when the clock stops and employment has to be back, or does it need to be done all the way through the end of the year? Do you need to have the same amount of employment?
You need to get back to your number of employees by the end of the year, but you can still apply for the PPP prior to that. How that's going to be verified has not been addressed yet, because that was my question as well.
I see. My question being, though, specifically, a lot of people are saying, okay, I took it out, I got the loan on May 1st, and it's now September 1st, and they're ready to apply for forgiveness. If on September 1st, when they apply for forgiveness, if employment is full, are they eligible for full forgiveness, or do they have to maintain that full employment through December 31st? Because obviously, business circumstances are changing, and some people are worried they may have to lay people off as the year goes along. So they're wondering about the timing of that.
That's a very good question, and that question has not been addressed either on our frequently asked questions or in IFR. And so therefore, I can't necessarily give my personal opinion on it.
Okay.
But when it comes out, it'll come out under Treasury, under a new IFR, or frequently asked questions. And questions will be coming now, because now we're in the forgiveness phase. And at first we were inundated with PPP phone calls from lenders and borrowers and so forth. Well, now that it's no longer eligible to apply for a PPP, now we're in the forgiveness phase. So now we're going to come out more than likely with a lot of frequently asked questions similar to what you have now on how do I deal with this? And that's the reason why when lenders say it's constantly changing, it is.
Well, that's great, though. So you guys basically, I imagine you're seeing all kinds of different situations and questions that obviously no one could have thought of in advance, but then will inform future guidance and policy, as I understand it.
Yes, and on that too, as these specific questions are rolling out, your local SBA agency can answer. So a lot of questions in the Q&A have to do with your finances, your specific loan and your specific loan number, and everyone is different. But build a relationship with your people, because when we get these questions, we can send them to Shelley, but if it's easy enough, we can send them to our resource partners. And you don't have to have that already relationship with them. Like, you can start at ground zero with the WES, the Women's Own Center, SCORE, SBDC, VBOC. These are all groups that want to hear your questions, and they will help you personally. It's hard to get all these numbers and everything out at once with one SBA agent. So make sure you know that number and call your local agency.
And I think, thank you for that. And I think that that's a really important thing to highlight here as well, is that was not well understood, at least amongst our network of businesses, that there were these resources that the SBA partners with that can help with those kind of things. So I think that's a very good point of advice. So we're 1 second. So we're over time now. So we had a really good hour. So I want to thank Shelley, Roxana, and Sara for joining us, and for the SBA for taking part. This was immensely useful. And as I said to everyone, we're going to send around the recording and also a list of all the questions that we addressed with answers, which I think will be great for reference. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and a special thanks to Shelley and Sara and Roxana.
Thank you, guys.